Did you know that there's a bunch of caves on the REZ? I guess I'm saying this to my non-indigenous people who are not familiar with it. I say this because those are the places you want to stay away from. I heard many stories of people finding caves with bodies, altars, offerings, fire pits, and a bunch of other things. My mom always told me to never go inside one. Something about it's like going into a home of a stranger. She even told me a story once about a cave that a family member went into one day. He found some things and moved them around, took some things as well, and even messed with something that he found in there, and he ended up dying a few weeks later. Did I listen? I sure did. Kind of. Sort of. Not really. What I'm gonna tell you happened the summer after I graduated high school. It was me, a few friends, some cousins, and a couple of their girlfriends. We were all bored. I remember it was late, close to midnight, and we decided to go driving near many farms. One of our friends lived out there and told us about this place people talked about, a cave where skinwalkers were said to meet, do their practices and everything else. As a Navajo myself, I will admit, we're not supposed to be talking about this, but we didn't have TikTok and everything else that you all have. And even though we are careful with what we say, we're all still curious about this. So after going back and forth, I wasn't the only one who didn't want to go. We ended up being peer pressure to go together. So we ended up taking 3 vehicles, my truck, my cousin's car, and our friend's pickup. And we drove about 4 or 5 miles off the main highway until we hit the sand dunes. The moon was full that night. It was bright enough that you didn't need headlights to see the dunes out in front of us. So we parked and got out. That's when our friend told us that we would have to walk across the dunes, drop down into a wash, and then hike just a little bit to get to the cave. Thought it was a simple walk a bit, see it and go back. But these people actually wanted to go inside. So as we walked, the dunes got higher, and the closer we got, the more quiet everyone else got. I guess more nervous. Eventually, a few of my cousins and their girlfriends stopped. They didn't want to go any further. You could tell that they were freaked out. And honestly, I was too. I remember we were down in the wash, but something didn't feel right. The whole time I remember my mom's story and every other story that I heard. I finally stood my ground and said that I'm just gonna wait right here. A couple of others stayed with me, but 4 of them kept going. They crossed the wash, climbed up a small ravine, and they got to the cave. From where we stood, we could see it under the moonlight. It had openings, almost like windows. They went inside. Just a few seconds later, I heard one of my cousins saying, "Damn, look at that. Damn, what is this?" They were talking among themselves about everything that they had found. But at the same time, one of my friends inside the cave was laughing, but not because it was funny. I knew his laugh. It was a mixture of nervousness with his laughing. After a few minutes, someone was like, "Alright, let's go. Let's get out of here because everyone else is freaking out." The 4 of them came back pretty quickly. They were all amazed at what they saw. Once we all got together again and started walking away, I started asking what they saw, and that's when they told me. Inside the cave, there were symbols drawn on the walls, bundles of human hair all around the floor. There was even a fire pit, and the smell was awful, like something was dead in there. But something that freaked me out was when they said that they saw some weird footprints, small-sized footprints at that too, except the toes were facing backwards. They also said it looked like there were some skins inside the cave hanging, but they couldn't really see because it was dark. And by the time that we got back to the vehicles, maybe 200 or 300 yards away, that's when we saw them. Footprints around the trucks. There were animal tracks everywhere, like those of a dog or a coyote, and mixed in with them were the same small-sized footprints that they saw in the cave. Those footprints were all around our vehicles, around all 3 of them. We all got scared and dipped out of there right away. Nothing happened on the way back home. We did tell our friends about what happened. Most people just laughed it off. But man, was that scary. Was something watching us? Or was something coming back to the cave? Nobody, and I mean none of us, went back to that cave. Because you know what they say, if you go looking for something, you might just find it. This happened about a decade ago, when me and my wife were empty nesters, living in a small trailer out on the Navajo REZ. We had been there a while now. Not the perfect world, but we pulled through. Before I tell you anything, I have heard all the stories, rumors, gossip, everything growing up, but to be honest, I never really experienced anything before. Or maybe we just got used to all the noises. I don't know. Not saying the stories you hear are not true. I just haven't experienced anything. That is, until an older woman, I'll call her Mary. She moved into a trailer home next to us. When Mary moved in, her grandkids were the ones carrying things inside. Boxes, old furniture, just a few things. And that same day I met her son. He looked to be in his early 50s. He came over and introduced himself. He told us that they wouldn't be around too often, that they actually don't even live out here no more. However, his mom didn't want to leave the REZ. He said that she was refusing to, so they looked around for places where she could still feel close, and this was the best option they could find. He said she was very old school. She kept to herself and didn't cause any trouble. He said if he could really ask us for a favor and just keep an eye on her, that they would come by once a month to check on her. I didn't have an issue with it. I never did talk to any of the other people except him. The whole time it looked like they had a complicated relationship. And I was right. The little helpers were her grandkids. But they looked annoyed the whole time. They were most likely ready to get back home to the city. After she moved in, is when the weird things started happening around the area. At night, we would hear noises outside. There were times it sounded like somebody was walking around. Other times some noises on the roof. At least it sounded like it. At some point we even heard some humming outside our home. Kinda soft, but far away. I forgot to mention that we had lived here for about 15 years. And nobody, no neighbors or anybody had ever mentioned, complained or even heard about anything happening around. And the reason I say this is because we left our windows open at night, let in some air in a place where you don't have an HVAC system. And I'm saying this because of what this woman, Mary, had told us. One evening, me and my wife were outside just sitting, enjoying the night, when Mary came out of her home. It was the first time she ever greeted us. She smiled. She stuck her hand out, and I helped her walk over and sit down next to us in one of our chairs. She introduced herself and just started talking with us. We had some good conversations. Nothing too serious, just everyday things. Did I say her age? She looked to be about 70. By the way, I was right. It wasn't true what her son said, that she didn't want to move off the REZ. It was that her son and grandkids didn't want to take care of her. But she said she was fine with it. Before she went back inside, I remember she was like, "You should keep your windows closed at night. It's not good." Threw me off guard a bit. It was just so random. And I mean, I know we kept our windows open, but how did she know? I mean, I guess she could easily see. That same night, we woke up again to the sound of a window in the living room opening. We didn't keep them open all the way, just enough to let a draft in. I grabbed the 2x4 that I kept as a weapon beside our bed from an unfinished project outside that I had been working on. When I went into the living room, everything was dark. That's when I saw a silhouette at the window. It wasn't moving or anything, but I could see the shape. So I ran up to it about a swing When I heard it talk, I stopped. It was Mary. What the fuck? Holding up the 2x4. I told my wife to turn on the lights. She said she wasn't trying to scare us. She said she noticed we left our windows open at night and that it wasn't safe. She was like, there's things out here that you don't want wandering close to your home after dark. She said she was only trying to protect us. I mean, I was pissed off. I could have killed her or something, but she apologized over and over. This whole thing actually brought us closer. It makes sense now. It was her walking around at night. But what about the sounds on the roof? The humming sounds. Well, it's always a good feeling when there's a rational, logical explanation as to the noises that you hear at night. But what about when you hear humming and some other strange noises that can't be explained? As I said, we ended up getting closer to Mary after that situation at night. She would sit with us sometimes and tell us stories about the land, about people that she used to live near. She looked at me and she said that I reminded her of somebody who she used to live next to. That's when she finally told us why she was so careful at night. Mary lived alone in a small trailer down a long dirt road, and there was nothing else around except for a few other trailer homes around. The trailer belonged to an older man who had passed away shortly before she moved in, and because of that, she was able to stay there real cheap. And within walking distance, there was another one. A young man lived there, in his 30s. His name was, I'll call him Joseph. Mary and Joseph. Mary told me that he was kind and respectful. He helped her with groceries. He would bring her some water. And he also gave her rides whenever she needed them to go somewhere. The summers were brutal. No AC. Just a lot of heat during the day. And sleeping wasn't easy. Mary said that one night, she was lying down in bed with the window beside her open. The screen had been broken long before she moved in, and the window took time to open or close. It had one of those old crank handles. As she lay there, half awake, that's when she heard somebody whisper her name. Mary. She sat up. At first, she tried to tell herself it was nothing. Maybe she was dozing off or something. So she laid back down. But then, she heard it again. Mary. This time, she knew it was coming from outside the window. She sat up and looked out into the desert. In the distance, she could see a big, hunched over silhouette, standing still. It was far away though, too far to make sense of the voice that she just heard. And whatever it was, couldn't have moved that fast. Terrified, she started closing the window, leaving it just barely cracked. When she looked back outside, the figure was gone. She locked her door and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day around noon, Joseph came by to check on her. He said he was worried because she was always awake much earlier. Mary said that she hadn't slept well. Then Joseph said something that made her heart drop. He asked her if that was the reason why she had been calling his name the night before. Mary said that she told him that she hadn't called his name at all, and that she had thought he was the one calling hers. She told him about what she saw in the desert. She asked him if anything like that has ever happened here before. He told her no, but Mary told me that she could tell he wasn't being honest. Before he left, he told her that if she heard or saw anything strange again, she should come over and get him right away. He also gave her a partially used smudge stick and told her to light it if she felt unsafe, which a few nights later, something even more scarier happened. The first few nights nothing happened, and so she was thinking that she had overreacted. But then it happened again. In the middle of the night, she heard the voice of Joseph calling her name again. When she looked outside, the figure was back, except it was closer now, still far enough away that it didn't make sense. This time, she used the smudge stick. She lit it and smudged the doors and windows of the trailer. and left it burning until she fell asleep. The next day, Joseph never came by. Around noon, Mary stepped outside and noticed that the door to his trailer was swinging open. Something felt wrong, and so she went over. Inside, the whole place was a mess. Furniture was overturned. There were broken items everywhere. Signs of a struggle, I guess. There was also blood on the door. And Joseph was gone. Mary ended up taking his truck and drove to the nearest town to contact Navajo Nation police. They looked around, but Joseph was never found. She gathered her things and ended up leaving that place. Mary told me that she has never doubted what she saw. She believes it was a Skinwalker. And even after all these years, she said the part that she still gets nervous about is hearing her own name. She decided to consult a medicine man, and she started becoming very traditional. Maybe a little too much that her own family didn't really want her around. Then again, most of her family had become city Indians. Mary told us that keeping your window open is an invite to any spirits or any other things roaming the night. She said that something won't always happen, but when it does, something about that they'll let you forget. They'll let you think that you're safe. Or maybe when you lived a whole life, they will remind you. Mary told us a lot of other things after that night. She said her family didn't believe her when she tried to tell them. They said that she was just old, imagining things. She didn't hold it against them. She said that she understood. Some people don't grow up hearing these stories or even experiencing these things, while some people just choose to ignore them. She told us that knowledge isn't meant for everybody, that some things are only passed when they need to be. Mary said that as long as you respect those boundaries, most of the time nothing happens at all. Nothing will bother you at night. Me and my wife helped her out when we could. We would bring her groceries, help fix little things around her home, sit with her outside when the evenings cooled down. Her family did come around for a while at first. They did check on her, drop things off, but over time, they stopped coming around. And about 2 months later, Mary passed away in her sleep. After that, we also ended up moving out. Just didn't feel right living there. Keep your windows closed at night. There are spirits and other things that will consider this an invite. When I first pulled into my driveway after a long day at work, I caught a glimpse of it. A snowman. It was standing in the center of my front yard. I stepped out of my car and trotted through the ankle-high snow that had fallen the night before. I walked up to the creation and looked at it. It appeared to be your typical snowman. 2 charcoal eyes, a carrot for a nose, charcoal buttons on its chest, 2 small sticks coming out from its side, and adorned with some worn-out gloves. Whoever had made this had some skill molding snow. I smile, thinking back to the simpler times of my life, times when I was young and not worry about bills, work, and the stress that now filled my life. I thought back to when my friends and I would each build a snowman together, have a bunch of snowball wars, and play in the frigid wonderland until the sun would abandon us. It was nice to see children still doing the same stuff that I used to do as a kid during the winter months. After a moment, my phone rang in my pocket, and I took my gloves off trying to fish it out. Once free, I answered it. It was my boss. Reminded me to finish typing up my reports for the next day. I thanked him for the call and returned the phone to my pocket. As I did, I noticed something strange at the base of the snowman in front of me. There were no footprints near it, aside from my own. I looked around him, but there were no signs of anyone else being here. I figured it must have snowed a bit when I was at work, and I made my way inside my house. Stepping through my front door, I was greeted by the cold, as I had forgotten to turn on my heater when I left for work. I kicked the snow from my shoes and danced over to the thermostat, cranking it as high as I could. I heard the heater rumble to life through the walls. Not long after that, warm air began to circulate through my house. I grabbed myself a beer and booted up the computer. As I waited for everything to turn on, I looked outside my window. Snow was starting to fall once again. I sipped my drink. I was not that much of a fan of winter, more so as an adult, but it was just a part of life, I guess. I looked over and saw the snowman once again. He was still out there, standing guard as it were. I wonder if the children who made him would come back and make another. My computer finally finished loading up, and I began working. It felt like hours had gone by as I was inputting numbers into spreadsheets, even though when I looked at the clock, only 45 minutes had passed. I let out a heavier sigh than before, and I rubbed my eyes. I leaned back in my chair and looked out my window again. This time around, I noticed something different. The snowman was gone. I got up from my chair and walked over to the window. It was a bit hard to see through the snow, but after a moment of scanning, I found it. It was about 6 feet to the left of its original spot, or at least I thought it was. I stared at it, wondering if it had even moved in the first place. I could have sworn it was closer to the driveway when I pulled in. I had to be imagining things. There was no way it could move, let alone move that far. I made my way to the kitchen to make myself a sandwich. Fatigue and hunger were most likely just getting the better of me. After making my snack, I walked back into my office and sat down in my chair, ready to continue working. I entered a new set of numbers, but something told me to look out my window once more. So I did, and what I saw almost knocked me out of my chair. This snowman was only a few feet away from my house, facing my window. I could feel my heart in my chest as I struggled to regain my bearings. I got up from the chair and walked over to the window itself and looked closer. It was definitely standing there, but it had definitely moved. I was unsure what to think. The kid, or the kids who had built it, were obviously still around and wanted to mess with me, but moving such a large mass of snow had to be difficult. I grabbed my coat, put my shoes on, and I opened my door, ready to give these kids a piece of my mind for messing with me. But when I did, my hand remained glued to the handle as I stared again at the snowman. He was now back in his original spot near my driveway, as if it hadn't even moved in the slightest. Fucking impossible. I knew what I saw, and there was no way it could have made it back to that spot in such a short amount of time. I looked around my porch for any sign of the troublemakers, but there was nobody to be found. I gave one more glance at the snowman before going back inside. I went back to my office and drew the curtains on my window. I tried my best not to think about it and simply focused on my work. After putting in the last bit of information into the spreadsheet, I finally looked at the clock. 2 hours had passed. I printed out the data and placed it in my briefcase. The sun had already set outside, and I thought about looking out the window, but I decided against it. I walked into the living room and turned on the TV instead. Not 2 seconds after I sat down on my couch, there was a knock at the door. Annoyed, I grunted as I peeled myself off from my seat. I gripped the knob, but at that moment, something inside of me was telling me not to open the door. I waited for a moment, then against my instinct, I opened it. A flurry of snow gusted inside, but there was nobody standing there. I took a step outside and looked around. Nothing. I looked over to where the snowman was. Nothing. Wait, the snowman was gone. I scanned through the darkness looking for it, but it was nowhere to be found. Maybe the kids took the snowman to mess with somebody else. I shut the door and decided it was time for bed. I shut off the TV and went into my bedroom. After getting changed and brushing my teeth, it was time to put this day to rest. I was woken up not too long after by a knocking. Once I realized where the knocking was coming from, I didn't even want to move from my bed. I could feel ice starting to form in my veins as I checked the clock on my nightstand. It was 3 in the morning. The knocking sounded again, and I felt my body shake as I kept my eyes fixed on my bedroom window. The glass vibrated as another knock sounded. Quietly, I got out of my bed and went over to the window. I gripped the edge of the curtains and gently peeked behind them. The fucking snowman was standing there, mere inches from my window. I got nervous, but even more angry that these kids were still continuing. Then, the snowman's head began to turn on its own. It slowly twisted to the right until its black eyes locked with mine. I felt my stomach rise in my throat and shut the curtain immediately. I ran over to my phone and called the police. When they asked me what was going on, I had to come up with something other than a living snowman. I told them that some kids had been playing a prank on me, and I asked if they could send a car to check it out. They agreed, and not long after, there was a knock at my door. The officer was rubbing his hands together to stay warm when I answered. I explained the whole snowman situation, excluding the part where its head moved. The officer nodded and took a walk around my property. About 10 minutes passed before the officer came back and told me there were no signs of anyone, and even more important, no signs of any snowman. I thanked him for taking the time to check it out, and he laughed. I stayed up the rest of the night until the sun rose. I wanted to leave for work early, just so I didn't have to deal with this anymore. I showered, got dressed, grabbed my briefcase, and stepped outside. The snow had stopped falling by this point. I looked around, expecting to see that snowman somewhere, but there was no sign of him in my yard. I went over to my car and got inside, and after a moment of relief, I glanced over, and that's when I saw it. The snowman was now sitting in my neighbor's front yard. I drove away, spinning the tires in the process as I sped down the street. I couldn't be sure, but it looked as though one of the arms on the snowman raced up and down, waving at me as I raced down the road. I have no idea where it came from, or how it could even move like that. But I think I'm gonna stay at a hotel for a few days until all this shit passes. If you ever see a snowman in your front yard, or any snowman in general, keep an eye on it. More than likely, it's keeping its eyes on you. This is the most disturbing REZ story that I heard. Never accept a gift from a stranger at night. My uncle used to tell me a story. He woke up one night. He was sick and hungover, and he said out loud, "I wish I had a damn drink." The typical reaction to someone who likes to drink right. He said that right there in the middle of the night. Something, or someone, placed a glass of whiskey on the table right next to his bed, and it freaked him out so much that he jumped up, knocked the drink over, and the glass shattered. I also believe him, because I grew up with him, and scary shit used to happen in that house. There's so many stories out there like this that sound similar. Can they all be true? I think so. So back to the most disturbing story that I heard. I remember this happening outside of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. You might actually be familiar with it. Everyone talked about it when it happened. A bunch of people were drinking. It was a party all weekend type of thing. Men and women. They were going in and out. The music was going. People were crashing wherever they could. After a while, the alcohol started to run low. They were about to call it a night when there was a knock at the door. People said it was a really good-looking man, and he was holding a 40-ounce bottle. It was a party after all, and nobody questioned who he came with or who knew him. Nobody was asking anything. They just let him in. They started pouring drinks from the bottle, and no matter how much they poured, It never emptied. They drink from the bottle throughout the night, into the morning, and then, in the afternoon, people said that one of the girls that was talking to him all night took him into a bedroom for a good time, and even some of her friends who saw her said they just continue on with the party. Everyone knew what they were going to the room for, so they just continued partying into the night. Now keep in mind, throughout the day some people would leave. New people would arrive with more alcohol as well. It was an all-weekend thing. The following day, when most people had left, nobody had heard from the one who went into the bedroom. Not even her friends, so they went to go check on them. When one of the friends opened the door, the girl was hanging from the ceiling. The man was gone. There was no trace of him anywhere. Nobody. And even after investigations, they said it was a suicide. Nobody saw the man leave. The room didn't even have windows. Well, it did, but they were boarded up. And even after interviews, people said that nobody saw them leave. You see, spirits are drawn to places where there's alcohol and drugs. Nothing in this world is infinite. Food runs out. Fire burns down. Water must be collected. Even ourselves, we're not infinite. So when something goes against that, when something never ends, that's how you know it's not part of this world. Combine that with what alcohol does to you. The longer you drink, the more control you lose. So I guess the question that I have is, why do you think it was her, if everyone else was drinking too? I don't have an answer. I think we heard so many different kinds of stories like this. But if anything, it just shows that it's true. You see, there's things out here that move from place to place, from one reservation to another, doing the same thing. Why do you think people talk about Walking Sam in Dakota, but they know him by different names on other reservations? You might know stories about a man showing up with endless food or drinks, sometimes money. Sometimes a woman follows him away from the group and is later found dead, sick, or not even herself. And the men are not safe either. You hear the stories of Deer Woman, different spirits, different traps. I guess don't trust strangers at night. One more thing. I was told that the ones who saw her hanging in the bedroom started waking up in the middle of the night, and they would see images of her hanging above their bed, right in front of them, with her looking down, smiling at them. They said that whenever they would ask her friends about what they saw, they would simply say, "She's still hanging," and they don't call her by her real name anymore. They just call her the one above the bed. Where I live, there aren't that many woods because the winds are so strong that they destroy most trees before they can grow. The trees in front of my house were all replaced about 3 times before a few of them survived the winter. Even then, only a few made it. So any wooded areas that we have get a lot of visitors. This place was no exception, and I've been there several times before these events, and a few times afterward. But what happened was some of the weirdest stuff that I ever heard. I was around 15. My mom and brother took our dog, Jack, for a walk and asked if I wanted to go. I stayed home because I was playing on the GameCube, which was destroying me. When they came home, something fell off. They were super quiet. My brother went straight upstairs to his room, and he shut the door. While my mom was cleaning mud off the dog, I asked how the walk was. She gave me a short answer, said it was nice, just very muddy, which already felt weird because she normally talked a lot with me. Later that night, after my brother went to bed, Mom finally admitted that something happened. She turned to me and said she didn't want to talk about it earlier because it scared my brother, but she wanted my opinion. She said everything was normal until they got to the deeper overgrown part of the woods. the part where most people don't go because there's no path. But it was early, and Jack still had energy, so they kept going. Eventually, my brother called her over and told her to look at this massive tree. When she looked up, she saw some black mango shapes high in the branches. At first she thought they were trash bags blown up by the wind. But my brother was like, bags don't have feathers and beaks. Around the base of the tree were feathers and blood. It clicked that the black shapes were more than 10 dead crows, impaled on branches. She tried to explain that maybe it was a storm damage, but something was wrong. My brother, always bold, thought it was pretty cool, and he started climbing the tree because a murder tree sounded awesome. He didn't get far before coming back down. Jack stayed glued to Mom the whole time, which was weird because he normally wandered off hunting for rabbits. When my brother reached the ground, he said some branches were sharpened into stakes, not broken off naturally, but sharpened intentionally and still attached to the tree. Mom decided to head back to the trail, acting like it was just getting too cold. On the way back, a small tree suddenly fell across their path. Its branches were also sharpened, and some of them had blood and fur on them. She put Jack on the leash and they ran the rest of the way out. My mom doesn't lie about stuff like this, so the next day I asked my brother about it as we were walking to school. His side of the story said the same thing as hers, except he added that he climbed down fast because he thought he saw someone sitting in a nearby tree, watching him. He didn't tell Mom because he thought she would laugh at him. Me being a bored 15-year-old obsessed with spooky stuff, I decided we needed an expedition. So I brought 3 friends. Mark, the oldest who used to babysit me. Leroy, he was the same age as me, and not really into scary stuff, but down for some fresh air. And Tim, who was always trying to act hard to look tough. One of their parents dropped us off together. We messed around in the woods, skipping stones, grabbing sticks like we were hunting the murder tree man. Eventually, we got to the end of the trail, and I realized I had absolutely no clue where the tree was. My friends called me a dumbass for a while, before we agreed that a tree covered in dead crows couldn't be that hard to find. We scanned the treetops as we walked. Tim and Leroy kept quoting the movie Predator, while Mark and I talked about parties and how bad we were at being quiet. Eventually, Leroy called us over thinking he found it, but instead, we found what seemed to be a shelter, made up of branches tied with twine, and also covering a bunch of other things. Inside was a tree stump like a little table. The wood looked fresh and recently cut. The ground was clear of leaves, and there were sharpened sticks nearby. Someone had definitely been using it. We ended up moving on, a little bit more quiet now. After wandering around, we finally found the murder tree. Just like Mom and my brother described, the top third of the tree was full of impaled crows. The tree was about 30 feet tall. It was too tall for this to be some random accidents, especially with the sharpened branches. We tried coming up with some sort of explanation, but none of us believed it. I kept scanning the treetops expecting to see someone watching us. Didn't tell the others about what my brother saw, so I kept that part to myself. We went a bit further and sat down to eat lunch. Nobody wanted to climb the tree, and after lunch, we pushed deeper into the brush. And soon, we smelled something awful. Leroy said it smelled like something dead. I had smelled rotting animals before, and even bodies. And he was right. We followed the stink and found it. It was the remains of a sheep. It was shoved between some rocks. It was basically skin and bones. Everything else was stripped clean. Somebody had done this. When we poked it loose with sticks, we found an entire pile of older animal remains underneath. Dark, decomposed. Some of them looked like birds, maybe a rabbit. It was a whole dumping site. And that's when we decided to get the fuck out of there. Mark led the way. Nobody said anything. Then Tim suddenly cursed and remembered he left his bag where we ate lunch. We told him to leave it, but he said his mom would kill him because it had her Tupperware inside. So we ended up going back. When we got there, Tom reached for his bag and jumped back like something bit him. He went white as a sheet and told us to look inside. There was a freshly dead crow stuffed in his backpack. I grabbed the Tupperware. I told Tim that he needed a new bag, and we took off running. I rolled my ankle on a fallen tree, and so I had to be half carried by Mark and Tim while Leroy kept watch. Then Leroy suddenly yelled that he saw someone moving at the top of the slope behind us. Right then, a man stepped out of the bushes into our path. He looked like a normal local guy, but he was carrying a double-barrel shotgun broken over his arm. He stared at us with a hard expression, and then he softened a little. He was like, "You kids shouldn't be running around the woods without an adult. You could run into something." We asked what he was doing out there. He said someone broke into his barn, stole the sheep, and he found a hole in his fence leading into the woods. He brought the shotgun in case he saw something on the way back. He offered to walk us back to his house to call our parents. It turns out that he knew the dad of Leroy, who was a veteran. My ankle was swollen badly enough that I missed 2 days of school. We didn't talk about it after a few weeks. Tim's mom was pissed about the backpack, but nobody ever really knew what happened out there. I've gone back since, and the woods have been opened up with new trails, but I still think that maybe someone was messing with us. I wouldn't say it was a creature, most definitely not a skinwalker. Maybe a person, someone who lives out there, who has killed animals, watched people, and possibly practiced something that could have turned into a murder. Someone who saw us, and who let us leave as well. I was traveling back from Seattle. There was my mom, dad, my sister, and I. We started out early in the morning, went from a warm, cozy house through the front door into a cool 30 degrees, and my mom and dad and my sister got in the car. We started out. I drove nonstop for about 6 hours, and then we pulled over to get gas in Montana somewhere. We drove on I-90 for another 10 hours. And finally got to Seattle around 10 p.m. After about 12 bathroom stops, 5 food stops, and 1 tourist stop, we found a motel and bedded down for the night. The next morning, we took my sister to see her birth mom. She was on her deathbed. We let my sister talk with her first, and then we went after. She was very sick. Cirrhosis does very bad things to the body. So after she said goodbye to her birth mother, we left Seattle. The mood back was kinda different. We didn't talk much. We stopped twice for gas, and then we made it all the way back to Montana. And Dad thought that we could take a shortcut through Miles City, and then turn on Highway 12, and it was gonna take us through Bowman, North Dakota. So after about 13 hours of driving, I was getting a bit tired, but I got some coffee and kept driving. It was about 80 miles to Baker from Miles City, so I put on some music and listened to the Cars, one of my favorite bands. I had driven about 40 miles and looked at my passengers. They all had their mouths wide open, catching flies. So I turned up the music and kept going. And then noticed there was a car behind me, quite a ways back, but it looked to be catching up to me pretty fast. I assumed it was a trooper, so I slowed down. It caught up to me very fast. He had his lights on, so I was gonna pull over, and he just went around me at a very fast speed. The car moved a bit when the airflow from his car hit mine. I grabbed the wheel with both hands to steady the car. I went over the long hill we were on, and he was already just a red dot in the distance, so I put the pedal down a little bit more and kicked up the speed. After driving about another 20 miles, I saw a bunch of lights up the road, a lot of police, and it also looked like a few ambulances. I figure, oh yeah, most definitely a wreck. I drove slowly to the side, and there was a trooper slowly walking to the car. I rolled down my window and he said, "Good evening, sir." I was like, "Hi, what's going on?" He then said, "We're asking all the drivers to be careful in driving on this road tonight. We had a driver hit an animal tonight, and they told us that there could be more around, so we're just letting everybody know to drive safe and be aware of any animals on the road." I was like, "Alright, I'll be careful." But I noticed he had a strange look on his face, and something just felt wrong. I drove by the accident, and I noticed that there was a guy being treated, and he was sitting on the back of the ambulance. There was also police standing around a gray blanket, laying over somebody. I assumed that was the deer that was hit. I also noticed that there were people standing over by the fence. I noticed that they looked like they were all wearing the same clothes. One woman was being held by a tall man. She was crying, sobbing, and there were others too that were crying and holding one another. I then saw there was a guy from the press. There was a van there, and he was taking pictures of the accident. Must be big news for this area. He took pictures of everything. I then yelled from my window, and I asked him what newspaper he wrote for. He said he wrote for the Star in Miles City, so that I could maybe look at the paper when it came out. I felt so bad for the people standing by the fence. They were so sad. And in all this time, my mom, dad, and even my sister slept through the whole thing. So I continue on. I made it home and went to bed. I didn't think too much of the wreck until about a couple of days later. We were in North Dakota, and I thought to check the Miles City Star, and they had one copy at the truck stop. I bought it, and I went through the pages. I finally found the article. However, my blood ran cold, and I just froze. One picture that the reporter took, the people in the fence were in the way. However, they were not people. They looked disfigured, distorted, even deer-like.
So you think you're safe from these things because you're not indigenous? Many people, even many people from the REZ, say that because they are outsiders, they aren't part of our tribe, can actually go wherever they please, that they are immune to these things because they aren't native, that they can hear all the stories or even try to find one of them without any consequences. I think otherwise, from experience that is. I'll share my story with you. It is kind of sad, but I think we can all learn from it as well, whether you believe the same things as us or not. I guess this is more of a warning. The story was told by a white teacher that came from back east to teach at a boarding school in the Navajo REZ. I think he said this happened to him at Caybeto, Arizona. Back in the 70s, that is. Later, he moved into our community to teach at a local boarding school. He was an outdoorsman. He said he liked to hike a lot out on the REZ, and sometimes he would camp out overnight. He loved the great open country of the REZ. One day, while working as a teacher in his career, he became curious about a distant mesa not far from the school. While he was out for lunch that day, he mentioned it to a few locals that he was thinking about hiking it and maybe camping overnight. The reaction he got was not what he expected. He said that one of the older men slowly shook his head. "You shouldn't go up there," the man said. "That mesa, it doesn't welcome outsiders." "Outsiders?" the teacher asked, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean? You might think you're safe because you're not one of us. There's things out there, things that we don't even speak of. That mesa is not for you. It's not for anyone." That's when a woman also told him, some places are meant to stay empty. He said curiosity got the better of him, and so he chose to hike the mesa anyway. So when he got up there, he chose a campsite close to the edge of the mesa with high cliffs, and he built a big campfire. And so he set up for the night. So as the sun went down, he said it was a clear night sky, and all the stars came out. You could see for miles and miles in all directions from this mesa top. Big campfire could also be seen from miles away from any direction. Then, as he settled in, he was looking out into the big open country. He said that's when he first noticed the red light shine far off in the distance. It appeared to be moving towards him, and it was also moving pretty fast. Now, he said the space was miles long. He said the red light was blinking on and off, and every time he saw it, it was closer than before. At first, he thought it might be a vehicle in the distance, but the way it was moving, zigzagging, covering vast distances real quick, he knew it wasn't a vehicle. There's no way it could move that fast. He said it looked like a small glowing red orb. As he was watching, he said it reached the base of the cliff. It blinked out and disappeared from view. All he could do was sit there, staring, wondering what it was. He said that it could have been some light that he had read about. After all, he was a teacher. Maybe it was light being refracted from a distant source, or caused by heat waves interacting with the cold night air. A whole bunch of geeky shit like that. Now where he had set up camp was at the edge of a sheer rock cliff that actually rose a couple of 100 feet straight up. After the red light disappeared, he went back to sit by his campfire. As he continued enjoying the environment, he said he began to hear strange noises coming from the direction of the cliff's edge. At first, it sounded like wind brushing against the rocks, but then it got louder. Low grunts, snorts, and the scrape of claws on stone. He assumed it was some sort of animal, but something about it was wrong. The sounds were too heavy, almost like if something was pacing back and forth just out of sight. He said he felt his heart begin to race as the noises grew closer, and then, without a warning, an old man appeared. He was pulling himself over the cliff. His eyes were shining in the firelight as he stared at the teacher. It was only after a long tense moment that the old man turned sharply, leaped back over the edge, and disappeared into the darkness below, making animal-like sounds as well. And yes, the teacher did tell us how he looked. He said he looked like an old native man who was wearing a coyote skin. He said after seeing this old half-naked man out in the middle of nowhere, it freaked him out and scared the crap out of him. I mean, to be honest, whether out there in the REZ or in the city or anywhere, seeing something like this would mean it's time for me to go as well. So he said he quickly tore down his camp and hightailed it out of there the same night. The next day he spoke to the locals again about what he had seen. The same older man who had warned them before was there. When the teacher told him the details, the red light, the noises, the man in the coyote skin. I told you that Mesa doesn't welcome outsiders. The man told him in a low voice, what you saw, it saw you too. His words sent a shiver down the teacher's spine, but before he could ask anything else, the older man stood up and walked away. He wondered how he knew about what he saw. After this experience, he requested to be transferred to some other school, and that's how he actually ended up at our boarding school in our community. Even though nothing happened to him, he said after that experience, he felt like someone was always watching him. Now, if this was one of those evil witches, why wasn't he attacked or anything? I don't consider myself an expert in this, but I do remember what my parents always said about these things, especially the first time I went home and told them what the teacher told us. My parents said that Skinwalkers are tricksters, who are here to scare people and invoke fear doing the job of others who hire them, or they can put a curse out on you. Maybe it was protecting the area, the space. Maybe by harming the teacher in any way would have caused more issues. You don't think it knew that the teacher was up there? They have eyes everywhere, all around the reservation. And simply saying what was told to us, what the teacher saw. But what about what he didn't see? What about what we don't know? I didn't hear anything else from the teacher those days. Now that decades have passed, I found out that he's no longer with us. The word is that he passed away back east a few years ago. But here's the thing that really sticks with me. There's a rumor that goes around. People say that he took his own life. Pretty fucking crazy, huh? What happened to him after he left the REZ? What stayed with him? Did something follow him? Was this encounter the cause of his suicide? Apparently, after I was done with school, he ended up quitting, and he started acting weird and left the REZ. Now, ask yourself, what was that about them not being able to cause harm to non-natives? They say that Skinwalkers are tricksters. They are meant to scare. But maybe, just maybe, the fear that they cause can be their strongest weapon. It wasn't what he saw on the mesa that cost him something. Remember, they have eyes everywhere. They will take notice. I had to go back. It's been playing on my mind for the better part of 3 decades. I had tried to forget most of my time there on the farm. They were mostly horrible memories, but bits and pieces of those horrible memories kept finding their way back to me as I grew older, and they left behind a question that I need answered. Could such evil and terrible things exist in this world? I pulled into the dirt driveway that led to the house that had long since been abandoned. The 2-story farmhouse sat on a small hill, dark and wistful. As I approached the winding dirt driveway, I could see the dirty rotting wood and broken shutters hanging open from dark windows. This was my home back in the 1980s. I grew up there. I had left when I was 9. It was a small farm, only one cornfield, small enough that my father could work it alone with some leased machinery. Even though the land was small, he made a good amount of money from it. The farm was different. Strange. The land is ripe for growing, Dad had said to me once. He pulled a scarecrow from the equipment shed that sat next to the cornfield. There were 4 scarecrows, and Dad would set them up just after the field was sold in for growing season. They would always go up in some sort of diamond shape. The first one he would hammer in at the north end of the field, the second one to the west end, third one to the east, and the fourth one to the south end. I had always wondered why he didn't hammer in the west end scarecrow last. It was the one closest to the house, but things had to be done a certain way on that farm. You'll see, Dad said. It's a special land, real special. The crops are off the charts for the size of the field. Stop throwing that football about and listen up to me. I did what he said and followed him behind closely as he dragged the scarecrow to the south end of the field. The butt of the scarecrow's stake dragged through the dirt, kicking up a bunch of dust. I listened carefully to Dad. Whenever he would tell you something, he only spoke kindly once, and if he had to tell you twice, well, this is going to be your farm one day, Dad said. He drove the scarecrow stake into the ground. Soon, not this harvest season, but maybe the next. I'm going to show you how things work around here, little by little. He then hammered the top of the stake that ran up the back of the scarecrow like a spine. I flinched at each of the 4 cracking shots. When he was done, he wiped the sweat off his brow and turned to me, his brooding figure silhouetted by the low afternoon sun. This land's good to me, real good. He smiled. You just need the right stuff. With that, he started back towards the house. I stood there for a moment, staring up at the scarecrow, its featureless straw face framed by a hood that was fashioned out of a rag burlap sack. Strands of straw poking from its head flutter in the gentle breeze. Something in my stomach churned over. I never did like these things. I popped the trunk of my rental car. I pulled out a shovel, then closed the trunk again. I looked out over the field. It was barren now. The soil had been untouched for decades. The equipment shed was far to my right, on the east side of the field. It looked just like the house. The roof had been partially caved in and the wall planks were warped in places. A chain fastened by 2 heavy-duty padlocks locked the doors. I gulped and swallowed. I prayed they were not in there. I started towards the farmhouse. The pylons were still out, on afternoons in the growing season, and just as the sun turned orange and started to set, Dad would hammer in 10 4-foot wooden pylons around the house, and then take them down first thing in the morning. The pylons had carvings on them, strange symbols that looked similar to what you would see on a totem pole. What are those symbols? I had asked once. I'll tell you one day, but you're not ready to know yet. When the pylons and scarecrows were out, Dad had a strict rule. I had to come inside when the bottom of the sun touched the horizon. One afternoon, I had spent too long playing outside. The sun was a big semicircle. It was peeking over the horizon line. But I didn't care that day. I was having too much fun and was feeling a bit like a rebel, so I just played. I was throwing Hail Mary passes to myself down the driveway. In my head, I was the star quarterback of my favorite team, the New England Patriots. I always wanted to be like Dan Marino. Even though he was a Dolphin player and a division rival, he was still my favorite player. The high-flying, gun-slinging star quarterback that could throw the ball 80 yards through the air. Yeah, that was me in my dreams. But the truth is, I never had the talent for the game. Oh well. But that afternoon, I threw the ball in the air and took off underneath it. Timmy Brentwood throws the pass high and long. I shouted. I watched the wobbly spiral descend, and at full sprint, I stuck out my hands, and I caught it. And he's got it. He's at the 10, the 5. Touchdown. I spiked the ball into the dirt. Timothy Brentwood throws the last-second winning touchdown pass in the Super Bowl. The greatest quarterback to ever... Timmy, my dad said sternly from the porch. I came crashing back to reality. What's the rule? Inside before sundown. Get a move on. Anger suddenly burned at the base of my chest. He was always bossing me around. I was always doing what he wanted. I always had to listen to him. He never listened to me. I was always meek and good and followed his orders. I never got what I wanted, so he could get screwed as far as I was concerned. Just this once. No, I don't want to. I actually said it, with all the misplaced confidence of a child being a rebel. I want to keep playing. Dad stomped down the porch with purpose. He spoke through gritted teeth. His veins and tendons were bulging from his neck. If I have to go out there and get you, boy. My heart froze. The confidence and anger melted away as quickly as it came. Now, I was only scared. I started back to the house, running past the pylons that we had set earlier in the afternoon. At the base of the steps, he grabbed me by my wrist and dragged me up them without my feet touching the wood. He put me back down on the porch and grasped my shoulders tightly. He dropped his face to mine. You listen to me when I tell you to do something. Then I got a hard clip over my ear. My ear went numb and started ringing with a high-pitched sound. My eyes swelled with tears. I looked at him stunned. This wasn't the first time I had been hit, but it was the first time I was hit over the head. Now go to bed, right now, without supper. Without saying anything, I ran inside. I slammed my door and curled under the covers. I buried my face into the pillow, and only then did I cry. Past the pylons that had been remained there for all these years. Some of them still stood, others were down. They were old now, blackened with mold and weathered. The wood split and the carvings faded. I walked up the porch steps that said their old age. For a moment, I stood at the front door. Tears started stinging the back of my eyes. It was not the house I had come back for. It was what was in the field that I needed to see. But it was the home that I wanted to see. Because through all the bad memories, there were still some of them that were good. The hinges whined as I pushed the door open. The house was exactly as I remember, untouched from that last dreadful night that I spent here all those years ago, the night that we had to leave. Only now, the home was caked with dust and mold. Cobwebs had collected in the corners. The wallpaper had peeled in the sheets off the wall. All these artifacts of neglect and abandonment. The TV was still there, gray with thick dust. Tears streamed down my face as I stood in the living room. The furniture standing around me like ruins. Every Sunday morning we would sit together there. I was able to watch Looney Tunes on the TV as Dad would sit in his recliner, reading the paper or a book, and Mom would make us her famous pancakes. No one could, or ever will make them like Mom could. They were thick and fluffy, served with a generous amount of maple syrup. If we were lucky, she would add some chocolate chips and serve with some ice cream. That was the best. When she was done cooking, she would come through from the kitchen with 2 plates stacked high with pancakes. She would give one to Dad with a kiss, and one to me with my own peck on the cheek. Then she would get her plate and join us in the living room. I would cuddle up next to her on the sofa, and we would sit together to enjoy her pancakes and watch cartoons. It was the only time during the week that everything didn't feel so cold. The one time that Dad didn't feel so distant. The one time I was not scared of him. The one time he would actually have a conversation with Mom and me, instead of just talking in short and simple sentences, or barking out commands. Those were the only times that we were a real family. I wiped my tears with my sleeve and walked outside, leaving the home behind for the last time. I waded out into the field, the soil hard beneath my boots. I could feel the spirit of the field with some satisfaction. I felt it was weak. Dad had called it special. I would call it evil. The night Dad had sent me to bed with a clip over the ear and no supper, Mom had come up with some soup and a glass of soda. She handed it to me with a kiss on the forehead. A mother can't let her child go hungry, she said. It goes against all my nature. Thanks, Mom. I know he's rough, but try not to get too mad at him. He does worry for you. That's all. I don't care. I hate him. She sighed and looked away, then ruffled my hair and gave me a smile. He does what he can to provide. Just leave the bowl and glass on the nightstand. I'll come in later and take it to the kitchen. She got up and walked to the door, stopping to say, I love you. I love you too, Mom, I said as she left the room. Later that night I had awoken suddenly. I sat upright. My football. I had left it outside that afternoon. It was my only ball, and it was just sitting out there, plain as day down the driveway. If one of the older kids, the neighbors from a few miles down the road, if they saw it the next morning, they would surely steal it, if it wasn't already stolen. And if they stole it, my dad wasn't going to buy me another. I could already hear his lecture in my head. Let it be a lesson learned. If you don't take care of your things, they're not going to take care of you, he would always say. I creeped to my door, eased it open, and peeked around the corner to my parents' room down the hall. The door was shut, and the house dark and quiet. Perfect. I crept down the stairs and tiptoed to the kitchen, where Dad kept the front door keys in one of the drawers. I grabbed them, and then, dipping in and out of the moonlight that flooded through the windows, I tiptoed to the front door. I eased back the deadbolts as slowly and quietly as I could. They drew back with a faint click. I waited nervously after each one clicked back, waiting for my parents' door to fly open, with my father's heavy footsteps tumbling out like a madman. But they never came. I opened the door and stepped out into the porch. My ball sat 15 yards away, looking lonely in the driveway. I was ready to make a mad dash for it, run over, pick it up, run back, lock the doors, sneak back to my room and go to bed. They wouldn't find out. But before I could take off down the driveway, I was distracted by a noise coming from the cornfield. To my left, the corn stalks were about 6 foot by then, and shining a pale green under the moonlight. That's when a man's muffled scream came from the corn. My heart skipped a beat. The corn was restless. The stalks were rustling back and forth in the center of the field, and then came another muffled scream. I froze, and my knees became watery. The scarecrows, they were not in their same spot. They were close together, in the center of the cornfield, their heads poking out over the top of the stalks. And they were moving. The corn started moving as did the scarecrows. They moved like they were wrestling with something. Another muffled scream. I stood there frozen, watching as the scarecrows fought with something among the corn stalks. I thought this was a bad dream, a nightmare. And in some sense, it was a nightmare, just not the kind you can wake up from. The muffled scream cut off. The scarecrows froze for a moment. Their hoods started ruffling gently in the breeze. Their heads were shifting, and their straw faces, featureless but somehow ingrained with hatred, settled on me. I was looking at something that I shouldn't be looking at. A shiver went down my spine. I was about to scream when a hand grabbed the back of my collar and pulled me backwards into the house. I was flung to the ground by Dad. He stepped around me and slammed the door shut, then locked the 2 deadbolts. I waited for Dad to turn around with a look of rage, but what I saw scared me worse. He had looked at me, not with anger, but with fear. It was the first time I had seen him scared, and I would see him this scared only once more. Just a few weeks later, I started to cry. Seeing him scared had scared me more than his rage ever could have. "It's okay. It's alright," he said. "You're okay, Timmy." He bent down and scooped me up. He carried me to my room as I cried, and he tucked me into bed, saying the same thing again. "You're okay, Timmy. You're gonna be fine." A murder of crows flew overhead, moving strangely silent. I stood in the middle of the field, the once rich soil now sick, and there was something else too. It was rumbling slightly, as if it were hungry. Already my shovel and paused. I asked myself, do I really want to do this? What is the point of it? What would it change? Nothing. So why did I come back? Foreclosure. That was why. The nightmares would continue. The anxiety would persist, and my soul would continue to whittle and seep from wounds that wandering fingers of doubt kept prodding open. I had to see if it was all real. I couldn't let questions linger. Could such horrible things exist in this world? Or were my memories simply warped and exaggerated with time? So did I want to do this? The answer was always yes. The answer was always that. I should have come back years ago. Maybe then I wouldn't have suffered for so long. Closure. That's what I needed. I pierced the soil with my shovel. My door burst open in the middle of the night. Dad was in the doorway with a rifle slung over his shoulder. "We need to go," he said. I sat up groggy. "We need to go." He pulled me out from under the blanket. "What's going on, Dad?" "We need to go." "But why?" He pulled me along at his side as we rushed down the stairs. His deep wrinkles and tan skin, his strong jaw and sunken eyes, his pointed nose and his mouth were all twisted in some expression of fear. The same scared look that he had on his face the night that he had caught me outside after dark. Except this time it was worse. I started to cry. "Dad, where's Mom? I thought I did everything right," he said. "I don't know what I did wrong. Maybe the pylons." The front door was already hanging open when he dragged me through it. Outside, the corn was restless again. "I'm not sure what I did wrong," Dad said. "I'm not sure how I didn't hear them come in." Dad dragged me to the pickup truck in the driveway. A woman's muffled screams came from the corn. I looked over my shoulder towards the field to see the heads bobbing around again. "Dad, where's Mom?" I said. "I thought I did everything right. I don't know why it went wrong." He opened the passenger door and threw me inside. "Dad, where's Mom?" I screamed. He shut the door in my face. He walked around the front of the truck, and for a moment he paused to look back at the field and the scarecrows, the shotgun tremble in his hands. To be honest, I think he would have tried to save her, if it was not for me. He continued around the car and climbed into the front seat. He fumbled with the keys in his trembling hands before inserting and turning them. The engine rumbled to life. "Dad, tell me, please." He reversed suddenly, swinging the truck around so that the front pointed down the driveway, away from the house. He slammed the stick into first gear and took off. The dirt underneath the truck went everywhere. That's when my dad began to say, "I'm sorry. I don't know what I did. I thought I did everything right. I'm sorry, Tim. Sarah. I'm so sorry." I cowered back into my seat, feeling the car bounce over the bumpy road as we fled. My father cried, and so did I as we drove off into the night, leaving the farm and Mom behind. I tossed aside the first clump of soil. Underneath the topsoil, the dirt was gray and pale as bone. I continued to dig, tossing the soil in a heap to the side. Then, I hit something. I threw away the shovel and got to my knees. I reached into the hole and pushed the dirt aside. I uncovered what I expected, yet feared at the same time. A human skull. I plucked it from the dirt and held it up with shaking hands. The hollow eye socket stared back at me. I put it aside and reached into the hole again. I clawed at the dirt with my bare hands. There were more bones, skulls and hands and all types of bones. I pawed and pawed at the dirt. I dug until my fingernails were torn clean off. It was true. It was all true. There is evil in this world. My memories had not lied. I fell back on my ass, exhausted, terrified, despaired. A pile had formed around me. So many skulls, so many bones, all from the souls that had fed the soil. In my family, death has come through suicides, car wrecks, cancer, kidney disease, and also alcoholism. It's almost like we're cursed or something. That's what my friend Max told us. Looking back, if I didn't know what I knew then, I would have thought it was just the hard luck of life on the REZ, which is never easy. But you have to understand that a lot of this has to do with the spirits, other forces and demons around us. We indigenous people have something in common with those who aren't native or indigenous. You see, almost every culture has a figure like this, something that brings both humor and a sense of danger, something that exposes the fear in people, and that would be a clown. However, the clowns that I'm talking about aren't the colorful balloon carrying ones that you see on TV, the ones with red noses and puffy hair. For us, there are stories of the suicide clown, the evil clown, and the clown from Pine Ridge. These clowns aren't here to entertain or have fun, but to actually cause harm, torment you, and sometimes even drive you to suicide. You see these clowns in the REZ, they're dressed differently, not in bright costumes but in clothes that are worn, dark, and twisted, and they carry this energy that you just know that they are full of evil. There's nothing funny or silly about them. They do laugh, just like other forces out there that take joy and pleasure in causing hurt and pain. These clowns are evil. To those who are not Lakota, it might seem weird to think of clowns this way. You know what? Not really, because from what I know, there is something about clowns that people fear. Well, these clowns are a real danger for us. I don't think I can explain it any better than by telling you about the encounter that I had with one myself. I don't call myself a clairvoyant or anything special. I swear on my parents' and grandparents' graves that this is true. My mentor, Ohansi, is an older medicine man who's practiced for over 60 years. Nobody would think anything of him except that he's old and pretty weird, but he doesn't care what people think about him. So I met a coworker named Max. We ended up becoming friends, and he had a brother and a son who killed themselves a few days apart. A niece had tried to hang herself in his home 2 years ago. She also ended up dying, but the cause of this was her driving drunk into a tree. Max was afraid of losing more family, and nobody on his REZ could help. He happened to mention it to me, and I brought it up to Ohansi. We went to Max's house to look around. He said we would come back that night when the evil ones are out. When Ohansi gets ready, he fasts, he prays to the Creator, and calls on all good in the universe. He doesn't talk much and gives thanks to all of those who will stand with us against evil. It's like he becomes a different person. I do whatever he tells me to do. It's my job. He told me to rest up, pray, because we're going to face something very bad and strong. We also don't take much with us whenever we go. Ohansi said that this evil was too strong for sage or tobacco. Apparently it was demonic, from the death world. So we went to Max's house that night. Ohansi told me to watch over the family. That's when he went out into the field alone. It was pitch black. and he was gone for what seemed like hours. I actually waited and started to get nervous, but he finally came back and said, "Tomorrow night, we're gonna wait down by the road." We spent the day praying, fasting, and getting ready. Medicine people have to see both worlds. Those of us who help them must understand that there's different realms that we don't see. It was almost midnight when we left. We walked up and down the road, and also off the road so passing cars couldn't see us. Ohansi motioned me to stay behind him. We hid down in a ditch and waited for something to happen. I had the feeling he knew what he was looking for, but I had no clue. Several cars went by, then it got really quiet. All I remember is seeing dim lights coming from our left. That's when Ohansi leaped out of the ditch and stood by the road. I stood right behind him. The lights got closer. It was a big black car. What I noticed was that it didn't have any doors, and the motor didn't sound like a normal car. I'm a mechanic on the side and know about cars. I heard a lot of motors, and this didn't sound like a real vehicle motor. What Ohansi did next scared me. The car stopped, and a whole bunch of dust started kicking up around it like it was trying to hide itself. Ohansi walked around to the passenger side. There was no glass in the windows or windshields. The car was, quote-unquote, running, but I couldn't smell anything. No gas fumes or anything. Instead, that's when I smelled something else. It smelled like death. I can't really describe it, because it's something you have to experience, or something you don't want to experience. But trust me, you will know if you ever do come across the smell. Ohansi then started praying very softly, and it seemed like he went into a trance. Pretty crazy situation while all of this is going on. But imagine a man in the middle of the road at night, with a car in front of him. The whole scene just seems pretty weird, huh? Well, I actually believe at this moment, we were on the other side. That's when I decided to peek over his right shoulder. I swear, if it wasn't for prayers, I would have passed out. That's when I saw a clown sitting in the driver's seat. But this wasn't a clown like the ones that you see on TV. Its face was painted white. Dark symbols covered its skin. All the marks in each symbol were twisted and also unnatural. Its eyes were glowing. Around its mouth it had an evil smile. Its hair was weird, dread-like almost. The clothes that this clown was wearing were hung around its neck, stained and frayed. I don't know what it was, but I can't even call it human. I couldn't look at it for too long. It felt like it was pulling me in, drawing me towards it. I didn't even want it to see me. Having to look away from its stare took everything I had. Ohansi was much closer to it than I was, but he kept his eyes steady. I'm not sure what he was doing, but he reached calmly inside to the back seat. There were people sitting back there, making the most awful whimpers I ever heard. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew they were dead spirits. My whole head felt like it was plugged up. I couldn't process what was going on. I couldn't hear, smell, or blink my eyes. It felt like I was floating and couldn't feel my feet. I just kept looking as Ohansi reached in, pulled out something with his right hand, waved his left hand over the passengers, and he just prayed. I kid you not. I saw with my own eyes the passengers float out the back windshield, up towards the stars, and then they were gone. Ohansi then pulled out a rope with a noose tied to the end of it. He showed me, and that's when I felt my throat tighten up. The clown then began to laugh the most wicked cackle I ever heard. My throat began burning, and I couldn't even breathe. I fell to my knees. Ohansi then put his hand on my shoulder, and that's when he started praying for me. He handed me a small cloth and told me to hold it up to my stomach. It felt like I was gonna vomit. My mouth was tingling. I started feeling something come through my throat, but then that feeling broke into a cough. Then my lungs filled with air, and I started feeling better. The numbness left my head and body. Ohansi then told me to stand up, and I did. The clown's laughing then turned into a horrible scream. We both looked towards the car, and it started smoking, like it was on fire. Bad smells were coming out of the smoke, like stale alcohol, blood, burning hair, burning flesh, and cigarettes. All of that combined together, that's what it smelled like. The fire then kept going, and the car simply just started fading away. And just like that, everything became quiet. I realized then that we were standing by the road as the sun was starting to rise. We had been there all night, even though it felt like 30 minutes. Ohansi then started singing an old song as we walked back towards Max's house. Once we got there, Ohansi told me to sit on the couch while he told Max what happened. He told him that all those tragedies were not a coincidence, but it was actually tied to the presence of an evil force. Max then mentioned all of his family members who had died over the last few years, and he wanted to know how this was tied to an evil force. Ohansi then explained that his family had been a target, open to these attacks. There's evil forces that feed on despair, pain, and also unresolved trauma. Stuff that has plagued his family for years. Not only this, but the spirits of his family were trapped, repeating the cycle of death. However, he told Max not to worry anymore. His family has been freed, and they have ascended, and he doesn't have to worry no more as long as he moves away and lives a better life. Then we prayed, and we left the house. When we left, I must have slept for like 2 days. I was exhausted. When I finally woke up, I was really hungry and forgot I hadn't ate for at least 3 days. Ohansi then told me that I did good, and he explained to me a few things that I didn't understand. He said that he knew I was wondering what happened back there, and all he said was, "There's evil out there looking for people who are open to these things." It wasn't human. The car was not a car. It was a trap. It was spreading death wherever it went. It was also carrying the spirits of Max's family. When I started praying, it wasn't an easy task, and it was not on my own strength. The prayers and ritual we did helped us out. The burning of the car meant that the curse, or the breaking of this thing that was holding on to Max's family, was being broken. Now, why were you choking? Let me just say that you still have a lot to learn. We still work together and don't take money from people. Ohansi says that the way to pay us is by doing right and living the good ways. Nobody from Max's family ended up dying tragically again. I'm just Ohansi's helper, as I wouldn't even want to be doing what he is doing. So I shared the story with Ohansi's permission. He said it was alright, that people need to know about what the dead finds out. But even as I write this, I know there are some other things I can never fully explain, as I don't even truly understand. Ohansi says that that's the way it's meant to be. He said there's some things out there that are older than us. Forces and spirits that don't care for our understanding. Now keep in mind, I didn't ask what happened. Everything that I'm telling you, all the explanations came from Ohansi's own mouth. Why do I say this? Well, it's not my job to find out. He's the one that explained to me what happened. But if you are meant to know, you will know. If not, let it be. We're not meant to know everything. Some truths are hidden for our own good, and even a small glimpse into this can be enough to drive you insane. We're not meant to know everything. Thank you for listening. My wife, a spoiled only child to wealthy parents living in New York. We've been married for 8 months at that time, and things couldn't have been going better. We had a house, a great career, and a couple of cars to really take in the American dream. We've been planning on getting a dog, with thoughts of children as well, even though things were not going to go as planned. One morning, my wife got a call from the police informing her that both her parents had died in a car crash. After the wake and funerals came the nitty-gritty legal stuff that nobody ever wants to talk about after a death. When we went over the will, we found that her parents had left her their estate. a 200-acre plot of land with $1 million home on the lake. We were shocked to say the least. We began moving in as soon as possible. We sold our old house and all the cars and graciously accepted all the belongings that her parents had wished us to have. There was only one small problem though. The house just felt dead. It was so big yet somehow cramped. All the walls seemed tighter than what they should have been, and you could scream from one end of the house and not hear it at the other. It took some getting used to it, but it finally grew on us. At least that's what I told my wife. However, when I was home alone, there was just something about that place. A creak in the floor, a rustle on the windows, the chill on my neck when I walked past the reflective window, feeling as if somebody or something was watching me. To be honest, I hated that feeling, and I didn't want to be there, at least not alone. My wife worked late every weeknight. She took care of people in a home for the ARC, and her shifts ran from 4 to midnight. I did enjoy the brief alone time. I would often write or read, or sometimes pack a huge bong and really get into a movie, and this happened to be one of those nights. I took a few big hits off my bong and wrapped myself in a blanket and started my movie. It was a Friday, and only about 8 o'clock, so I figured that a few beers wouldn't hurt. I had 4.5 hours until my wife got back. I cracked a few and made it about halfway through the movie before I heard something downstairs. I swear I thought it was the house playing tricks on me like it's done many times in the past. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard something slam. I quickly got up and went downstairs. My heart froze when I could see the glow of the kitchen light that I know I had turned off. I quietly inched my way to the large doorway that entered into the kitchen. I could hear movement. An overwhelming sense of dread seeped over my body as I finally peeked around the wall. It was my wife. "Jesus Christ, woman!" I half-jokingly shouted at her. She jumped, startled at my presence.
Oh God, don't scare me like that.
"Don't scare you? I just thought I was about to die. You don't think you could have called out to say hello or something? And why did you come home so early anyway? Was Julie alright with that?" I asked.
Yeah, she's fine. I told her I wasn't feeling well.
"And are you feeling well?" I asked, seeing that she seemed perfectly fine. She had a guilty look.
I'm totally fine. I just didn't feel like being there,
she said with a half giggle. I found this surprising. She never comes home early and she didn't seem to make a big deal about it. I quickly changed my focus when I noticed that she had a few bags of groceries. I asked her what she was making, to which she responded,
Chicken Alfredo.
"Oh damn, can't wait. You need some help?" I asked. She turned around with a knife in her hand and she laid out the chicken. She smiled and said no. She then slowly pointed the knife towards my face with lusty eyes.
Tonight is about you.
She said, getting the knife closer to my face.
I'm going to make you this dinner, and maybe later you can help me with a few other things.
She smiled again. I bit my lip and watched her continue prepping the meal. I told her I was going to watch the rest of my movie. I then went upstairs and sat down for my movie. About 15 minutes later, my wife walked into the room. She was still holding the knife.
Dinner is ready.
It's all she said as she slowly left the room. I went downstairs minutes later to find the dinner all nicely set up and ready to eat. The table looked amazing. Too amazing. You outdid yourself. I gotta get a picture of this for Instagram. I shuffled through my pockets and noticed I had left my phone in the room. I quickly went up and couldn't seem to find it anywhere. I'm sure it was just lost in the blankets. I went to the top of the steps and shouted down, "Can you call my phone?" She laughed.
No, you gotta work for this Insta picture.
"My food is getting cold." There was no response. I continued looking for about 3 minutes until I finally heard it vibrating. I found it on the ground underneath one of my shirts. It was my wife finally calling me. "Finally," I said, and hung up the phone as I stood up to go downstairs. The phone started ringing again. My wife. Again. I answered the phone. "What do you want?"
Excuse me? What was that finally for? And why are you being rude?
"Well, you didn't want to call my phone, and now you do," I said.
Sorry, I can't call you whenever you think about it. I'm at work. I've got shit to do.
She said, sending a cold spike through my core. What did you just say? I asked.
I said I'm busy. I've got another hour of work and I was just calling to tell you I miss you. But you gotta answer the phone like a dick.
She said. So you're saying you're not at home? In the kitchen? I said, my voice now quiet and a little shaky.
Oh, haha, I'm not in the kitchen. Good one.
She laughed. No, I mean, there's someone here that looks exactly like you. She's downstairs. I thought you came home early, I said as I felt my body begin to paralyze.
You need to lock the bedroom door right now and find whatever weapon you can. I'm calling the police.
She said. Babe, what the hell is going on? Who is that? I asked. Fear started flaking from my voice.
It's my sister.
I stayed in the room until the police arrived. Turns out she had gotten skittish and left far before the cops got there. They found arsenic in the food, the knife stuck in the table, and a letter with a few words that said,
The house is mine.
My wife never told me about her twin sister. She was in and out of prison and psych wards her whole life. She had been disowned by the family and was as good as dead. That's until she heard about the accident. Now, all those strange feelings I was getting feel a lot more valid. And those feelings haven't stopped.
This happened a few years ago in South Utah. My family and I have some friends that live on the Navajo REZ, near the bottom of Utah. Our family is in Navajo, but my parents had met some friends a while back who are. Now, my parents had always told me about the legends that their friends had told them. I was never really scared of them because, to be honest, I didn't believe they were real. Well, we had talked to our friend Joey about coming down to the REZ and camping with him for a few days. He was on board with the idea, and we made plans to drive from Salt Lake City down to the campsite, which was about 10 miles into the REZ. It was a pretty normal road trip most of the way, and we stopped by a few towns to take pictures and eat. But we had decided that we were going to make it to the campsite in one day. We had been driving from 6 in the morning to 3 in the morning, and we were all tired as hell. I had been sleeping in the back while my father drove and was talking to my mother. My parents started to wake me up because they said we were about to pass the welcome sign to the Navajo Nation. I looked out the window and waited a few minutes before I could see the sign, and kept my eyes on it until we passed. I remember watching the sign, waiting to feel the bump in the road where the pavement changes. As we passed, the back of the sign came into view, and I looked over the backseat to watch the sign until it was out of sight. But when I turned around to look at it, I saw something standing behind it. It looked like a deer, standing on its hind legs, but it looked broken. The entire form of the deer looked wrong, and I could see that it was staring at us, and I stared at it for a few seconds while it was still illuminated by our backlights. I turned back around and wanted to tell my mother what I had seen, but by the look on her face I could tell that she had also seen it. My mom explained what we had both seen to my dad, who said it was most likely a statue or something and that we were just tired. My mom insisted, and my dad said we would ask Joey about it when we got to the campsite. While we pulled up to the campsite, Joey and 2 of his friends were sitting around a campfire talking. We were welcomed, hugged, and greeted each other and began setting up our tent. Once we had everything set up, my mom and I got into the same tent and started to go to sleep while my father stayed outside to talk to Joey for a little bit. I wasn't really listening as they were talking, but I started to pay attention as my dad began asking Joey about this thing that we had seen. Right as my father got to the description of it, Joey became quiet, and I could hear him whispering to my father in a hurried tone. All I could hear my dad say, "But we just got here." About a minute after that, my dad quickly got into the tent with us and told us that we needed to go. My mom and I were annoyed by this. That's until we saw that Joey and his friends were also packing up their stuff as quickly as they could. I asked what was going on, but the only answer I could get was, "Just get in the damn car right now." The scariest part at that moment was the way Joey was looking around the campsite. I had never seen my dad, or anybody else, move so quickly and pack everything up. As soon as we got everything in the vehicles, Joey told us we needed to stay somewhere off the REZ and that he and his friends would escort us. He made it very clear that we needed to stay on the phone with him until we got to a hotel. We all agreed and began to drive back from where we came. It was mostly a silent ride until we started coming up on a wall of rocks in the road. As soon as we could tell what it was, Joey started screaming in the phone that we needed to either go through it or go around it, but that we needed to do it quickly. My dad drove around the rocks, carefully moving the vehicle, trying not to pop a tire, while still trying to make it out of there quickly. As we started pulling back onto the road, that's when we heard a scream, or more like a screech, coming from in front of the vehicle, maybe about 50 feet away. Joey only said, "Keep driving," which was enough to prompt my dad into driving faster than he had ever driven before. We made it to a hotel, and Joey refused to speak about what just happened. The only thing he said was that we needed a blessing of some sort before we left. We didn't want to, but seeing what happened earlier, we were gonna go with whatever Joey wanted. I never really believed in, well, I'm not gonna say their name, but after reading up on them and comparing the stories online to my own, I firmly believe they're out there. Some people would call me a professional outdoorsman. I spend a lot of time out in the wilderness, fishing, hiking, camping, but best of all, hunting. I love to go hunting, ever since I was a kid, even though I have my father to blame for that. While other children were out riding bikes or having sleepovers, I was clutching a rifle next to my father to stay warm in the cold mornings. My father and I spent almost every fall together up there on the mountain. He would teach me about the various wildlife and all the different types of plants, which ones were safe and which ones weren't. He also taught me how to track and how to maintain firearms. I remember the first time I saw my first buck. He stood there between two rows of trees, only 50 meters away from me. I leveled my rifle at him, looked him square in the eye, and squeezed the trigger. I missed, and the deer ran off into the woods to live another day. I felt defeated that day, but my father, even though he was strict, was very understanding of my shortcomings. He told me even the best hunters in the world miss. That made me feel better, at least a little bit. The years seemed to fly by, and I had hunted nearly every type of game in those mountains. Even though I was having fun, I never let a kill go to waste. I would always bring back what I killed to stock my freezer for the following months. After high school, I got a job working as a camp supervisor on the mountain. It wasn't anything amazing. Mostly, I would just sit there and read magazines all day, sometimes having to tell a group of frat guys to keep the noise down, or reminding the scatterbrained father to keep an eye on the campfire. Like I said, it was pretty boring stuff, but I did get to be closer to nature almost non-stop. And not to mention, the campgrounds closed at the start of the fall hunting season and reopened the following year. I had just packed up my truck and said goodbye to my mom. I did this every single year, and yet my mother would always tell me how much she worries about me. My father, on the other hand, would always tell me not to come home unless I bagged something bigger than my truck. The following morning, I woke up an hour or so before dawn, got in my truck, and drove to the mountain. I had my own personal spot I would park my truck at, which was a narrow path that ended about halfway up the mountain. I hopped out, grabbed my gear, my rifle, and took a deep breath before walking into the woods. Around 20 minutes of walking, the sun had just started to creep over the horizon, its rays igniting the sky above me. That was always one of my favorite parts about being outdoors so early.
I continued my hike through the terrain, over logs, and through the dense brush. It wasn't long after I arrived at a clearing. I figured this was a good place as any to set up camp for the night. Whenever I go hunting, I stay out for a few days at a time, just to give me more opportunities. I had quickly set up a small one-man tent and created a small fire pit. The sun was almost directly overhead at this point. Even though I was still busy situating my surroundings, I couldn't help but feel eyes on me. I backed out of my tent, my rifle in hand, and scanned the tree line around me. Another good lesson that I picked up from when I was young was to always trust your instincts out here when you're hunting. I thought maybe a bear was getting too curious for its own good. I grinned at the thought of my dad's face if I managed to actually bring back something as large as my truck, but I quickly reminded myself how dangerous these animals could be. I stood there motionless, listening and scanning everything around me. After 5 minutes of nothing, I returned to my tent, but still more alert than ever. Finally satisfied with how my camp looked, I quickly scarfed down 3 protein bars and a bottle of water before venturing into the woods. It wasn't long before I caught the trail of a small herd of deer not too far ahead of me. I took notes of each broken twig, grazing spot, and pile of droppings along the way. Just as I was about to peek my head through some underbrush, a deer jumped out at me. This caused me to jump and fall on my back hard. Before I knew it, 2 more of them followed as they all scampered past me, disappearing into the woods before I could even ready my rifle. Rising to my feet, I couldn't help but notice the strange behavior. Normally, deer don't run towards a hunter like that. Usually always they run in the opposite, unless something else has scared them first. I peeked my head back through the underbrush and noticed something strange. There was a deer lying on the ground in a pool of its own blood. Its entire throat and chest seemed to have been torn from its body. I could feel a mix of curiosity and concern rise in my mind. I wonder what could have possibly done this. And I also wonder how I didn't hear it happening with how close it was. While I was lost in thought, I heard the rustling of twigs and leaves on the far end of the deer. I looked up and caught a glimpse of something, only for a moment. But whatever it was, it looked gray. Maybe a wolf. But it still doesn't explain why I didn't hear it, nor why it didn't stick around to eat its prey. I decided it was best to start making my way back to camp. The sun was now on its descent, and I didn't want to be out in the woods after dark. It's very easy to get lost at night. The twilight was growing in the sky with each passing moment. I tried to quicken my pace, but I knew I wasn't going to make it back to camp before the sun had fully set. Still, I continued on, trying my best not to think about the possibility of a wolf lurking around, because if there's one, there's most likely a pack around. I began to get that feeling again of somebody's eyes on me, from some unknown location. I could feel my hands gripping my rifle as I continued to walk. Then, a rustling of leaves and crackling of twigs caused me to stop and aim with my rifle. It was 2 squirrels chasing each other around the tree. With a heavy sigh of relief, I lowered my guard and turned back. But when I did, I saw something that froze me. There was something attached to a tree directly in front of me. It looked like a man, but not really. Its body was a grayish blue color, and it was gripping onto the tree with large claw-like fingers. I felt sweat run down the side of my face despite the cold temperature outside. Its head was twitching about as if it were looking for something. Slowly, I raised my rifle towards it, but when I did this, it caused the creature to stop twitching its head and look directly at me. Its eyes seemed to reflect the light from some unknown source. They shimmered lightly in the dusk. I wasn't sure what I was actually looking at, but my instinct told me that it wasn't friendly. I steadied my breath, lined up the shot, and fired. The gunshot echoed through the forest as birds and other creatures scurried away from the sound. The bullet hit the creature, and when it did, a new sound replaced the gunshot. The creature let out a shriek, a chamber another round, not wanting to take a chance. Yet when I did, the creature was gone. I scanned the trees and the nearby ground, but there was no sign of it. I know I had hit it, but I wasn't about to stick around to make sure. I continued my journey back to camp, but when I got there, I found my entire campsite completely ransacked. My tent was shredded, and all my supplies had been scattered about. Just then, I heard something behind me. I slowly turned, and was only a few feet away from this creature that I had just shot. It was on all fours, crawling, still twitching its head as it moved. I could see it much more clearly now, even with the light missing from the sky. The skin on its mouth looked torn, and its jaw was hanging loosely, as it was breathing silently. Its eyes were completely white, almost as if it were blind. I shifted my body slightly to face the creature, and when I did, it stopped crawling. Its milky eyes were looking directly into mine, and in a split second, I pulled my rifle up and fired, but that didn't do anything to stop it. It leaped through the air and knocked me down. Its large claw-like fingers were scraping at me while its mouth, filled with razor-sharp teeth, snapped in my face. I was trying my hardest to keep it from biting me by holding it back with the body of my rifle. But this thing was strong. I rocked from one side to the other and used the momentum to throw the creature off of me. It scrambled to its feet, but I was faster this time. I took a quick breath and squeezed the trigger, catching the creature in the head. It wheezed and fell back. That's when I got up and began running towards my truck. I looked back only once, and when I did, of course, I saw no sign of the creature I had just shot. Panic set in as I jumped over logs and tore my clothing on branches. I was just praying that I was going the correct way the entire time. As I was running, I started to feel more and more eyes on me, as if the entire mountain was now aware of my presence. I went around a small hill and almost screamed when I saw my truck. I got into it and drove out of there. When I made it home, my mother was happy, and my father was concerned at all my cuts and wounds. I told him that a bear had attacked me and that I had narrowly made it back. I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I really saw up there. Weeks went by, and I couldn't shake what I had experienced. I doubt I ever will. I have since quit my job at the campgrounds, and I have started looking for jobs closer to town. I have hunted everything up on that mountain, but that night was the first time that something had hunted me. I don't think I'm ever gonna go back to that mountain, and if you plan on going into the wilderness, be careful. A wolf or a bear aren't the only things lurking within the trees. I've been a park ranger for the better part of a decade. It's both a demanding job and one filled with enjoyment. I'm sure some people out there don't care too much about the great outdoors, but I do. I remember back when I was a kid, I would spend countless summers begging my parents to take me camping at the park. My mother wasn't too thrilled with the idea, but my father would still take me, even if she wasn't up to it. My dad and I would spend almost every summer out in the woods, hiking and fishing. It was the age-old cliche of father-son bonding time, but I suppose it's a cliche for a reason, right? I never grew tired of it, even as I grew up. Eventually, I learned that you can make a living working in a place like this. At the time, I had very little concept of park rangers and what they do. To me as a kid, I just thought that they were police officers with funny hats. Don't tell anyone, but I still kind of think that. After high school, I went to college, and during my last 2 years, I was lucky enough to get a job as an intern at a park not too far from the school. I would mostly do errands, but often the rangers would take me out on ride-alongs. We would drive around in a pickup truck and just enjoy the scenery. Sometimes, they would have to tell a couple of people to hit the bricks, but other than that, Everything else was a breeze. After finishing college, I applied to become a ranger myself, and was lucky enough to be selected. It's a highly competitive market, so being chosen was huge for me. My very first day on the job, I'll never forget it, mostly because everyone I worked with never let me forget it. I was walking out of the ranger lookout. I guess I wasn't paying attention, and I missed a step. I tumbled down the stairs, spilling my coffee all over me. I swear the laughing could be heard for miles. Aside from that unfortunate misstep, it's been an enjoyable ride, to say the least. Over the course of my career, I dealt with numerous events. The first major one that I could remember would have to be the time a group of kids had gotten a hold of some fireworks, which aren't permitted in the park. They had set a few of them off, and we were called out to investigate. We arrived at the location not long after the report was made, and lucky for everybody, no damage was done to the park or the kids. We escorted them back and called their parents to come pick them up. One kid damn nearly wet his pants when I told him that I spoke with his mom. I couldn't blame him. She sounded like the wrath of God even when she was speaking to me. Other than that, there have been a few domestic disputes at the nearby campgrounds. Those happen actually quite frequently. People often get stupid when they get drunk. So we calmed them down or asked them to leave. And since they don't want to pick up camp, most of the time they just go to sleep. But the worst day was a couple of years ago when a local kid from a nearby town had gone missing. We were all called in to be part of the search effort. Apparently, the boy had wandered into the woods and had gotten lost. We searched and searched for days, but in the end, were unsuccessful. I still remember his face on the flyer that his parents had made. But that brings me to the scariest day working as a park ranger. I'm sure that's why you're all listening anyway. It was a slower day in between spring break and summer vacation. During that time, there's a lot of visitors, so our roster was somewhat spread out. Not to mention, we had some people retire recently, which actually left us pretty short-handed. I was stationed in the main ranger building at the entrance of the park, while Alan, another ranger, would be at the lookout further inward. After checking in and getting situated at the start of my shift, I watched out of one of the nearby windows as Alan hopped in one of the trucks and drove it to the lookout. I waited around 10 minutes before getting on the radio and telling him that one of his taillights was out. Another few minutes passed before he hopped on the radio and told me that he was halfway up the stairs, then had to head back down to check, and they were both fine. I laughed through the receiver, and I could hear him already pulling a prank on me. The day progressed and I did a few patrols in the mornings, just to take some time to enjoy my surroundings. The nearby lake was glistening with the morning sun. Along the trail, I saw two hikers who returned a friendly wave as I drove by. I stopped by the campgrounds to see if we had any new campers, and was surprised to find it empty. Regardless of the time of year, there's at least one die-hard outdoors person staying here, but not this time. I didn't pay it much mind. After all, it was less work for me. Once noon rolled around, a massive cloud seemed to appear out of nowhere. They didn't look to be storm clouds, but were thick enough to block out the sun's rays. I dreaded having to drive around in the rain, so I hoped the weather would be okay. Nighttime was fast approaching as the overcast sun descended. I radioed to Alan to see if everything was fine, and he reported nothing out of the ordinary. The park after sunset was very beautiful. The stars that normally fill the night sky are a sight to behold, and the sounds of the nocturnal forest coming to life as a sound is something I'll never forget. About an hour after sunset, Alan got on the radio. "Hey, John," Alan said. "What's up?" I replied. "Come out here, man," he said. The way Alan spoke was strange to me. He sounded a bit nervous, a little bit off. Maybe his nerves were getting the best of him. "Alright, I'll be out there in a minute," I said as I exited the ranger station and hopped into the truck. As I drove out to the lookout, I radioed Alan again to ask him if everything was alright. but the radio just crackled in response. I sighed, thinking he might be using the bathroom or something. Once there, I parked a few yards away from the tower's base. I hopped out of the truck and turned on my flashlight. As I was approaching the stairs, my boots sloshed into the muddy ground. This caught me off guard, as even though there were clouds in the sky all day, it hadn't rained a single time. I lowered my light and saw that the ground had a strange tint to the mud. What was weird was that as I looked at it, I noticed that the muddy ground seemed to lead away from the tower. I followed it to a nearby tree line that surrounded the tower itself. In between two trees, I saw him. Alan, or what was left of him. His body was torn to shreds. His face was completely torn. If not for his uniform, I doubt I would have recognized him. As I was standing over my bloody coworker, the radio crackled to life. "Hello, John?" Alan's voice came through. My breathing stopped. "Are you almost here?" he asked. The voice coming through the radio was definitely Alan's, but that was impossible, as I was currently staring at his remains. I snapped my head and looked up to the tower above me. Even though it was dark outside, I could see someone inside of it, a silhouette, standing still through the glass. I then got on the radio. "Alan, are you in the tower?" "Yes," came the response. As soon as whoever it was responded, I made a dash to my truck. As I ran, I looked up and watched this thing run towards the tower's door and begin to descend the stairs. I barely managed to jump inside the truck before whatever it was reached the bottom. I quickly started the engine. To this day, I'm still not sure what was standing in front of me. Its skin was gray from head to toe. Its body seemed muscular, yet lanky at the same time. Long arms and legs protruded out from its torso. I could see the flesh expand and contract with each ragged breath it took. Its face was by far the strangest. Large eyes. The lower half of its face was just a mesh of teeth, some even puncturing its own skin. It raised a long, clawed hand to its mouth, and I could see it was holding something. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life. It said in Alan's voice, "John, are you there?" I floored my truck and ran into the creature as hard as I could. The metal on the truck creaked for a moment before the thing fell to the ground. After that, I reversed out of there, spinning the truck around and driving until I was completely out of the park. I was interviewed by different law enforcement agencies about the events of that night. I tried my best to be honest, but hearing myself explain to the local police that it was a monster sounded insane. The authorities determined that it was most likely an individual who was crazy that attacked Alan, and when they went to go find him, he was nowhere to be found. It's been almost a year since that day, and I have since moved 4 states away, getting a job at a smaller park. Some of you might think that's crazy, but I do still love the outdoors. I just refuse to work once the sun goes down. I try to look up reports of similar incidents, and the closest thing I could find were stories, or legends, about strange creatures that are called wendigos, the REZ, or Skinwalkers. I have no idea if that's what I saw that night or not, but here's some advice. If any of you are planning to visit one of your state parks this summer, I would highly recommend it. However, if you're planning on camping at one overnight, please be very careful and never trust the voice when you can't see its face.
In the traditional Navajo way, skinwalkers are seen as witches, but they weren't always seen that way. My late grandmother, who was a medicine woman that practiced the blessings way, told me of the origins of the skinwalker. Being a skinwalker wasn't always seen as a bad thing. In fact, they were seen as people with amazing gifts. They could change into the form of any animal,
run a certain distance very quickly, mimic people's voices, and some were known to use magic. During the colonization, Skinwalkers were used to relay messages between war camps and spy on the enemy without being detected. Having the Skinwalker abilities was a gift. Whenever we lost, the good of the community took a backseat, and people began to focus on themselves instead of sharing what you had. People began to look after their own families, claiming property and livestock, and there were people that got the short end of the stick. Jealousy is a terrible thing. People became jealous of one another, wanted more fortunate people to lose what they had. They looked to Skinwalkers who had otherworldly powers to do their bidding. Now, being a Skinwalker is not a gift. You condemn yourself to a life of unhappiness and anger. In order to become a Skinwalker, you must sacrifice someone that you love very much. This shows that you are indeed committed to depravity. The interesting thing is that you could have met a Skinwalker and not even know it. They are people like you and me. They have chosen a path in which they will hurt other people. We burn clothing and personal items of deceased relatives, and it is very taboo to keep anything that belongs to the dead. Keeping such items can make a person sick or suffer horrible events in their life. However, Skinwalkers surround themselves with death. Skinwalkers have been known to grave rob and search through people's garbage. They use bones and hair from the dead and victims' personal items to create bundles. They place these bundles near a person's home, and bad luck will fall upon the person. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the story that I'm about to tell you is about my older sister. In her younger days, my sister was very much interested in the rodeo scene. My family actually has a pretty impressive legacy when it comes to the sport. My sisters didn't compete, but had plenty of friends and family that would go and watch. My two sisters would travel around the Southwest following the rodeo circuit. The cowboy lifestyle isn't always glamorous. It can be filled with alcohol, drugs, and depression. Unfortunately, this took hold of my sister, and she got in trouble with the law. My sister was looking at jail time, and the family was very concerned about what might happen to her. My mother went to a local medicine man, and they talked about the next steps. They decided to have a ceremony for my oldest sister. A few days passed, and it was time for the ceremony. The medicine man and his wife showed up a little past dusk. They came into our house and we served them the food we had made. Everyone chatted for a little bit, and when we finished eating and cleaned up, it was time to start. Everyone sat down in the living room in a circle. The medicine man sat on the far west side of the room. My older sister sat to the left. In the middle of the circle was a large pile of sand that was smoothed out on top. My uncles got hot coals from the fire and placed them on the sand. The medicine man started praying in Navajo and sang blessing songs. This went on into the night. At the height of the ceremony, the medicine man turned to my oldest sister and told her that they would have to go outside and pray in the darkness, and he told her not to look around as he is singing. He told her to keep her eyes on him. The medicine man, my sister, and my uncle went outside. The medicine man turned around and began singing into the darkness. My sister was watching him sing, trying to keep her focus on only him. Then, she heard it. Off in the distance, she heard someone whistle. This made her feel sick to her stomach. Our elders tell us about our culture's taboos, starting at a young age. One of the biggest things that they stress is to never whistle at night. They tell us only the dead whistle at night. So when my sister heard whistling out in the darkness, fear gripped her heart. She was so scared that tears began to well up in her eyes. The whistling got louder and louder, as if whatever it was moving closer and closer. My uncle was outside during the prayer. He admits that he was scared too, but he wanted to be there for my sister. What my uncle saw was even more miraculous. He claims that as the medicine man sang, a bundle came from up above. The eagle feathers that the medicine man was holding opened up like a hand. The bundle gently floated down into the feathers, and the feathers closed around the bundle. The medicine man stopped singing, and the group went back into the house. My sister stumbled in, clearly shaken from the experience. The medicine man could see how my sister was. She then asked him what was whistling. He told her it was a skinwalker, and that he was trying to call the bundle back to it. We gathered around to see what was in the bundle. The medicine man opened up what looked to be a leather pouch. Inside of the pouch was a bone about 1 inch wide and 3 inches long. Upon closer inspection, the bone was hollow, and more items were shoved inside of the bone, held in place with twigs and dirt. He dissected the bone to find hair and pieces of a shirt that belonged to my sister, and a very tiny drawing of a woman behind bars. Whatever was calling out to this bundle had very ill intentions for my sister. Fortunately, after the ceremony, all of my sister's charges were dismissed. I asked my sister what they did with the bundle, and she said that she wasn't really sure. She says that she remembers being very scared when they were outside singing. My sister controls her emotions very well, and so I can't even begin to imagine how scared she must have felt in that moment. So if you ever hear whistling out at night, don't ever acknowledge it. My mom recently shared a strange and creepy experience that she and her sibling and parents witnessed when she was younger, at around 6 years of age. My mom is not the type of person to lie about this just to scare someone. And also, my aunts and uncles have verified the story individually. My grandparents, mother, aunts, and uncles lived in a small pueblo, a small town, in Mexico with a population of about 1,000 people. They were all scattered throughout the landscape. They lived at the bottom of one of the larger cerros, or hills, that would take a couple of hours to get to the very top. My abuelitos were very poor. My grandfather was making just enough to provide for their necessities by working at a sugarcane field. But yet they were living in one of the nicer homes because of its proximity to the hill and what everyone would say, a witch's house at the top of that hill. Everybody around there stayed away from that house, and the rent was the cheapest there was out of everything else, out of all the other houses that were available. My abuelitos, grandparents, tias y tíos, aunts and uncles, and my mom had some paranormal experiences in that house. Most of these were attributed to the witch in typical Mexican folklore fashion. This thing that they witnessed, however, was what made them leave. Mi madre, my mom, says that one day she was inside at the entrance of the home with the door wide open, playing with some toys. My tíos and tías, aunts and uncles, were in the same room behind her also, while my abuelito was relaxing on a rocking chair in that room. She said she was playing and the door to the house was open. As she looked up, as a medium-sized black dog was walking along the road in front of the home. What spooked her was that this dog had 2 human breasts hanging from its chest that were connected to its skin as if it was part of its body. She says that the breasts were hairless, which allowed her to see that they were indeed the breast of a human and not some sort of tumor on the dog. My mom says that the dog instantly gave her a very bad feeling and she started to cry. My mom's crying then caused the dog to stop in its tracks and look into the doorway towards my mom. That's when my grandfather got up and headed towards the door, and so did my uncles, to see what was happening. He instantly recognized what the creature was and pulled out a small gun he always carried with him because of the long treks he made on foot to his job. He aimed the gun and tried pulling the trigger, but the gun kept jamming and would not fire. He tried it a few times, each time checking and making sure the gun was in proper working order, but it simply would not fire. All the while, the dog was just standing there, watching. The dog eventually turned and started running down the road and into some overgrowth along the side of the road. After it disappeared from view, my grandfather tried shooting his gun and it fired without a hitch. Even though they were very limited financial-wise, they moved out within a week after this encounter. Unfortunately, both of my grandparents passed when I was very young, so I cannot ask them about this event. I also never heard of skinwalkers partially changing, turning, and I found this story quite interesting. Sometimes, when we gather together as a family, joking and playing and having a good time, I tell my mom to bring up this story just to give everybody a spook. In a quick summary, that she saw a black dog with human breast hanging from its chest. Grandfather's firearm jammed when he was trying to fire at the dog, and then the gun started working perfectly fine once this dog ran away. Most of my family, when they hear this story, believe it was the bruja, the witch, who lived on top of the cerro, the hill, who apparently, they always say, was a nagual. In Arizona, there is an older woman who lives not far from my grandmother's house. She works about halfway to Gallup, New Mexico, maybe about 20 minutes away from my grandmother's house. On cold mornings, she gets up before the sun to start her car and let it warm up before she makes the drive. Her house is surrounded by a dark wood fence, which is about 5 feet tall. This one morning, as she is making her way out to the car, she hears voices that seem to be chanting and giggling. She thinks they are coming from over by this low hill to the east of her house and back from the road. She walks over to the fence and takes a look, but it's still dark and the hill is covered with trees and bushes. She doesn't see anything or anyone, and the voices have stopped. She doesn't give it another thought, goes about her usual morning routine, and eventually leaves for work. A few nights later, she is bringing in her laundry from the outside line when she hears really loud music coming from the neighbor's yard across the street. She decides to be nosy and walks over to the fence to see which one of the boys it is, thinking that maybe she can ask him to lower the volume some. Just as she gets to the fence, she sees a dark figure step from the trees on that low hill and make its way down towards the street. It's moving kind of funny, as if it's not accustomed to its own body. She screams, and it starts to run really fast towards the young man playing the boombox. He must have heard her, because she says he lowered the volume. However, when she turns back around to see where the figure has gone to, it's now gone. She says that she was certain that it was a skinwalker. The canyons throughout the four corners, for those who don't know, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, Nevada fits in there too, are populated with signs and indications of the presence of the ancestors of the tribes native to the area. Most common are petrographs and petroglyphs, drawings on stones, the remains of cliff dwellings, and ancient roads which seem to run to nowhere. There are also man-made structures of stone houses and temples. Most of these areas are accessible to visitors. However, they are also monitored by local and tribal authorities, which protect them and ensure their preservation. That being said, it is not uncommon to find graffiti and other evidence of disregard for these historical sites. Several years ago, a friend of mine, a local Hopi guide for the tourists, and I are poking around these ruins. It's already dark, but if you are going to go to these places for the reason we go,
See if there's anything of value that hasn't yet been recovered. You have to go at a time you're likely not to be seen. I have gone to other similar places with this guy, and we had some luck with small relics that tourists will buy. By the way, I am Hopi as well. We are only there for a short period when we hear something moving towards the ridge and only a few yards from where we are. My friend takes a pistol from his waist and points it over to the trees. He's calling out in our native language some words we both know and which are generally used to ward off dark spirits. By the sound of things, whatever is out there is getting more bold and coming closer, but we still can't see anything. At the same time, there is this feeling of dread building up inside of me, and I'm thinking too how nice it would be to have a pistol instead of the flashlight that I am carrying. At this time, we're both thinking Skinwalker. But that's just part of who we are as Hopi. My friend then starts backing the two of us towards the edge, running up and over our heads. Just then, this sharp, yipping sound breaks out, followed by this sustained high-pitched scream, which slices right through me like an icy wind. I find myself praying before I realize I am doing it already. My friend is starting to chant in Hopi, his voice filled with fear. We both have no doubt it is a Skinwalker, and it is coming right at us. I lift my flashlight and point its bright beam in the direction of that blood-chilling screech. The Skinwalker, still in the dark, responds by making this throat mucus-filled sound, a sort of coughing noise. I am waving the light all around trying to get a glimpse of it. Just then, I guess my friend can't take it anymore and starts firing his pistol, the rounds tearing through the bushes. I drop for cover and duck my head, saying the Hail Mary the whole time. When he stops firing, I look up in time to see this dark shape run up the sheer slope of the ridge, just to the other side of the trees and brush. We didn't hang around to see where it went, leaving the ruins behind and getting back to our truck. So if you ever go anywhere near the Four Corners, don't stay past nighttime. And whatever you do, don't venture out into any native, man-made structures, temples, or anything related to ancient native tribes. You might just come across a Skinwalker. My grandfather told me a story once, as we sat around a campfire in his backyard in the cool night of the Arizona desert. The horizon was clear, and each star twinkled in a purple sky, with a full fat moon hanging low over the mountains. His voice was raspy, the result of a lifetime of smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The fire danced and shined across his wide dark eyes as he settled into his seat, ready to tell his story. Way back when I was a boy, about your age, I lived outside a reservation with your great-grandfather. He had returned from the war and set about raising horses and cattle on a 100-acre ranch settled between a brambly mountainside with good dirt for growing thorn brush and not much else. One night, my mother was sick, and Pa and I took a trip into town, about 50 miles away, straight through a dry desert, over a washed-out creek and some old abandoned farmsteads. Pa and I were driving in an old Ford pickup truck. I remember it was dark out, inky and thick, with only the lights of our old truck lighting up the road. I remember it so much. The engine began to sputter, and the truck slowed to a jerky stop. "Damn it," Pa said, guiding the Ford to the side of the road. As it coasted to a stop, my Pa said, "Stay here, son," and he stepped out into the darkness, shutting the door with a heavy thud. My window was down,
and the cool desert air was breezy and felt good on my hot face and neck. Paul was getting water from the back to cool down the engine, and that's when I smelled it. Rotten eggs. Strange, I thought, to smell sulfur in the desert. My nose also picked up the smell of one of those dead, bloated cattle that would drop from the heat and lay there until the crows pecked enough holes in their hide to cause the whole thing to explode. It stunk, and I gagged. My skin started to tingle too. The back of my neck felt itchy, and my face started to get very hot. The wind stopped blowing, with the stink filling the cab. "Pa," I called out. No answer. My heart started beating, and I felt such a fear in me, in my bones, in my chest. I tell you, I never felt fear like this. Not until Vietnam. Not until I saw men dying around me. I locked the door and reached over for my pa's door and saw a shadow bound across the road through both dim beams of light across the partly open hood. Grandfather paused telling the story. He spit a fat piece of tobacco to his side, and he looked very pensive into the darkness. I realized I was holding my breath and gasped for air. The night was breezy, but I was sweating and clammy. "What about your father? What did you see?" My grandfather, continuing the story, sighed. "A creature." He shook his head. "You have to understand, there were legends. Old legends. Much older than what's out there in the valley. Older still than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, than the old chiefs and their shamans, the Apache and Hopi and Cherokee, and all them old tribes and First Peoples. They told tales. They told stories about dark magic. Something about a deal made with the old spirits of blood sacrifice to gain power, old power, enough to fight each other and the Spaniards, and later the white men that came for their land and women. They called them." He paused. Grandfather took a deep breath and looked towards the fire, to the sky, the desert, the creek, the moon, the sun, and then leaned a little bit and said, "They would call them Skinwalkers, old warriors resurrected as skinless men, walking on deer legs with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote, but they were messed up, long and disfigured, teeth like a Bowie knife, long arms, and standing 7 feet tall, even hunched over. They would gut the old cowboys and white riders. They'll run through the bullets, part the Spanish armor like it was a potato sack. And boy, could they change their voice to match a person you knew or might know. And that's what I saw, big and fast. Only for a second, it ran across the road, gray and molted, muscle flexing under its legs, clumping on the road, stringy muscle hunched shoulders, and it turned, looked right into the cab, and looked at me, right into my eyes. And I swear, it grinned at me. I sank into my seat. In fear, shaking, I knew my death was coming. I smelled ozone and brimstone. The air felt like right before the lightning comes and blows a tree to smithereens, charged and full with power. I yelled for Pa, but no words came out, just a dry squeak. I started to shake as my grandfather told his story. He was still here, so I knew he lived. But the supernatural always fascinated me, and even now, I felt the force of his words. The real power of Skinwalkers was trickery. Sure, they could change their voices, but also their skin. That's why the gods took their hide, so they could take others. Not for long, the legend says, maybe an hour, before the soul of the skin that they were wearing would come looking for their mortal shell before going to whatever hell awaited them. Even though I think that getting skinned alive was hell enough. A minute passed in what felt like a lifetime. 1 second in 1,000 years. My father's door opened, and I jerked my head to the left, putting up my hands to fend off an attack. "Son, it's me," my father said. Before climbing into the cab, he got the steering wheel and pulled himself in an awkward way, jerking himself into the seat. I cringed into the corner. I looked at him. I looked hard. Your great-grandfather was a good man. Treated me and my mom right. He fought the Nazis and saw the worst of man in Poland when he freed all those camps. And now, I was taking his measure. Is this my father? Do I make a run? Or do I die? Is it him or not? Let's go get that medicine for your mom, as he pulled the truck into gear and pulled it out into the road. And our trip resumed. I guess it was him after all. But how did you know? Was it because he said something about your mom? I knew, because out the window, out the corner of my eye, I saw that same beast running 50 miles an hour right next to our car, looking at me with those yellow eyes and grinning mouth. I looked and saw it, hunched and angry, running next to us. My pa kept his eyes on the road, looking straight ahead. "Son," he said, "don't look at it." That's how I knew it was my dad. He knew what to do, and he kept telling me to just keep looking straight ahead and to not look at whatever was around us, running. He then told me that by acknowledging its presence, you give it power. That's where my grandfather finished the story. I kept staring at him, but by this time, he was just looking straight ahead, looking around me, and said we should go inside. As we went inside the house, he then told me to not ever mention Skinwalkers. He also said that speaking their name out loud or mentioning them at all, even in text, even in stories, even if someone else is telling you a story, is supposed to make them aware of your existence.